Growl.
It's like your new image.
It's like growl.
Sounds bad, doesn't it?
It's part of your new image.
All right. We're just having a little fun here before we start up. Welcome to Progressive Soup. My name is David Stevenson. I'm Emily Volpentesta on camera number whichever.
Yes.
If they can switch it over to there, she's co-host.
Okay.
With us we have Dan Carter. We were supposed to have Representative Jonathan Steinberg also. Jonathan was unavoidably detained, not able to make it. So what Dan Carter has graciously agreed to do is try to talk from across the spectrum about the state budget. He's gonna talk about it from the entire perspective and counterbalance his own self.
Yeah.
So that's not an easy thing to do. He's got the opportunity. He's going to go with it, and we're proud to have him here. Dan Carter, Emily Volpentesta. Dan, introduce yourself first of all.
Glad to be here. I am the state representative from the 2nd District. I have Bethel, Danbury, Reading, and Newtown. In my 3rd term in Hartford, and glad to be sitting here with 2 bowls.
Congratulations.
Left and right.
Jonathan Steinberg, thank you.
And you just got back from vacation.
Just got back from vacation,
right.
Hence the facial growth we've been joking about today.
That's right.
I don't know, camera, it might look like I'm dirty, but I am clean. I've taken a shower this morning.
Just a little peach fuzz. He hasn't decided whether he's going to keep it yet. So here's your opportunity. You want to have a special session in the towns to determine whether he should stay with the facial hair or not have the facial hair.
Well, they do say that the media.
Write your congressperson and write your state representative and tell them what you want.
Lose the beard, Dan.
No, it's true. Well, they said in the election between JFK and Nixon that because TV had just come out, that it really helped JFK win that.
Nixon didn't take any makeup.
The 5 o'clock shadow.
He looked kind of rough hewn, if you can say that. And Kennedy looked polished, and the people that listened to that debate on the radio said they felt by a slight margin they thought that Nixon did the better job. The people that watched on television felt very clearly that Kennedy did the better job in the debate because of the visual. So there you go.
Well, I think generally speaking, we're kind of joking about it, but politically speaking, I think you don't see as many people with beards in politics.
No, it's true. You're right.
I think there's something, I don't know if it's subconscious or what it is, but I'm very aware of it. This morning I get up, I just ended vacation.
Right.
And I've been out there for maybe a week or so. And I really thought about just whether should I shave it today because I might be on TV or whatever. And
shout out to the Upper Peninsula. Shout out to the Upper Peninsula in Michigan. That's where Dan was.
Yeah, it was nice.
Wow. So did anyone make comments when you were at the?
Well, what was interesting is this morning we had a special session.
Oh, okay.
I don't know if you kept track. Well, the House had unanimously. Well, I should say it was not unanimous. I think 5 people voted no. We passed a bill that would have established requirements for the State Board of Education commissioner.
Okay.
So this way, the governor would have to have some parameters, and there were things like you had to have so much time as a teacher in a classroom.
Yeah.
You had to have been an administrator. They were very broad, but the governor vetoed the bill.
Yeah.
So what happened was a lot of the Democrats were very interested in overturning the veto, as well as Republicans.
Yeah.
And this was one of those years where we could have probably pulled it off.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of talk about doing that. Well, Friday, so this was just past the weekend. It's Monday now.
Yeah.
They said, okay, we're not going to do it. They kind of pulled the plug. But the Republicans still wanted to do it. So what happens is a veto session is always scheduled.
Yeah.
So we just all showed up. And a handful of the Democrats all showed up too.
Yeah.
So we didn't have enough to overturn it, but it was very interesting because we actually had a veto session, and we all voted. But I think we needed 101 people to do the vote. So from the governor's standpoint,
we needed a quorum of 101.
Well, you have a quorum to open, but you need 101 of the people, so 2/3 to overturn the veto.
Okay.
We didn't have enough people show up and vote in the affirmative, so we couldn't override the veto.
Yeah.
Now, to Governor Malloy's credit, he spoke with the education chair, and what they're going to try to do is come up with something next year that they feel is a little bit of a better match to what those would be.
Yeah.
Remember, there's always a question between the executive and the legislature of how much power the executive should have to appoint their own committees. A lot of people say it should be carte blanche, which to some degree it should. I think so. It's his team. He should pick it.
Right.
But in this case, the legislature came forth and said we wanted some parameters. So it was interesting. So we had a special session today. Back to facial hair. I decided to go with it and show up, and then they got to be on camera for that anyway.
Wow, that's so
but it's been an interesting session.
Yeah.
So the budget, Dan Carter 1 and Dan Carter 2. You're going to talk about the budget and explain some of the bones of contention in it.
Sure.
From both perspectives as best you can, and I don't, if you can pull it off, that's great. I very much appreciate that. Jonathan Steinberg had the opportunity, and I know you and Jonathan Steinberg are compadres in a lot of respects, and have a lot of commonality in your viewpoints on things. So it may not be that difficult for you to enunciate what Jonathan would have said had he been here.
It would be interesting to hear his take because Jonathan's in one of those positions where I believe he voted against the budget. Mm-hmm. This was a very, very controversial budget from the beginning.
Sure.
So as you understand, when the budget rolls out in the process, it's the governor that comes out in the beginning and establishes the budget, right? And that happens pretty quickly, usually right away in January. This year, I think in February, we had a budget session where he did a speech and he announced his goals and what he wanted to do. Mm-hmm. And with that comes a very, very thick book about where the money's going to go. Mm-hmm. Now, the problem or the criticisms of his budget were that what he did was he kind of went in and he gutted everything.
Yep.
I mean, he took every organization you could think of and chop it. The political view of that, I mean, I think what he was trying to do, number one, he said he didn't want to raise taxes.
Right.
So he knew he had to make significant cuts to do that. The other thing, I mean, now you're putting kind of all in the hands of the legislature because everybody and their uncle is calling us right now asking for restoration of what he cut. So he had a really hardcore budget, and he could stand there and say, this is a realistic budget, it's balanced, I want to go with it. But now it was really in the hands of the legislature to work out the kinks.
Yeah.
And of course, on both sides of the fence, we're under enormous pressure to make sure that most of those programs and safety net programs are still there.
Sure.
It's very difficult. Everything from small cuts to veterans' funeral services. I mean, we heard all kinds of outcrying about different things. So the next stage in the process is where the Republicans and Democrats either are working either on their own budgets or the Democrats are working on theirs and the Republicans are kind of coming along. Mm-hmm. In this case, what happened this year, the Democrats start working on their budget and they're looking to put as many of those cuts back in, so that way the programs aren't cut.
Right.
The Republicans were also in the same position. And we're looking at it, and from my perspective in the Republican side, we were looking at it and saying, wow, it's going to be hard to do a budget without raising taxes. It was really, we're in deep, dire straits. Mm-hmm. But as we looked at it, the Republicans decided to come forth with an alternative budget. They were able to put one together, and it was pretty solid. I mean, it put the majority of things back, not all. The one problem for the Republicans was it relied on opening up the union agreements. Mm-hmm. They're coming open, or we can open those up soon for the state unions and try to look for savings. This was looking at I want to say $280 million of savings from the unions.
We'll talk about that later because I have some thoughts on that, but continue.
Very controversial. Yeah. On the Democrat side, of course, we didn't hear a lot about what was coming for sure until closer to the end.
Yeah.
And so at the end of the day, your Republican budget's put out a couple days before the Democrat. It's a very political thing. Ours gets poo-pooed off the table. It's never going to work, that kind of thing. Yeah, and then the Dems come out with their budget. And so the good news is it put back a lot of the things that were chopped for people. The bad news, it was from the Republican perspective, it was a horrible budget because it had huge tax increases. Mm-hmm. Upwards of $1.5 billion again, and so Republicans, of course, were fit to be tied as that thing happened. But the Democrats were pushing forth, and they knew it was going to be a difficult budget. So the interesting thing is, as we got closer and closer, as you call the corporations and the businesses, all kind of came together, and you said we're out of here. Like when that budget was released, there were a lot of companies who saw specific things in that budget that were going to be problems, especially for corporations.
Right.
Specifically, one of the things they call is unified receipt. So if GE, and I'll use them as the example because they're clearly one of them that was in the news, right?
Okay.
So for GE, if they have a wholly owned subsidiary in another state, that company may be doing business around the country, but that is taxed there. It's like its own company because it's a wholly owned subsidiary of GE.
Correct.
What we did is through this, we said, all right, we're going to take any company you own and all business you have everywhere, and we're going to tax it in Connecticut. Mm-hmm. So that was a huge hit to a lot of those folks. That was a problem for a lot of the companies.
Right.
The next part of that little puzzle is loss carryover. So sometimes in a business, if you have a big loss, you're able to carry that over to your taxes and take a reduction, right? Because it's if you lost some money, then they're not going to tax you on it.
Right, of course.
Well, what happened with them is they reduced that amount significantly, cut it in half. And with all companies together, $150 million or so across the state. But it would have particularly been a big hit for GE because they've had some losses. I know they've had business units that they're reorganizing and they're trying to get their act together, even though it's a big company.
I've noticed that.
Right.
In Stanford, a lot of it shut down a lot of.
Right. And GE Capital. So those were big hits. Now there were property taxes and other things that were big. So that became a big political problem, I think, for the administration. For the administration in the House, because remember, that really wasn't Malloy's budget, and everybody and their uncle was calling up Malloy's office. And I think they were saying, "What's my budget?" They're hanging up because it really was the Democrat majority's budget at that time. Yeah. So to the governor's credit, he got involved. They were trying to find ways to reduce. The reductions they made were very small. But what happens is politically, I think people look at it and say, well, at least he went to do something. It's still, from the Republican standpoint, it's still a very hard budget to swallow because you're still looking at $1.2 billion in tax increases, and the economic side, for a lot of reasons, they're just not happy. On the Democrat side, it was hard for them to get this budget through this year, which was really interesting. I've only been there this is my third term, so it's my fifth session. Right. And the way it works is in the beginning of the year, the 2-year term, the budget is done in the first year. This is a long session. Yeah. Okay. So this is the third time I've sat through this.
And you do a 2-year budget at once.
We do a 2-year budget, and then the idea is we come back next year, and most of what we do is supposed to be tweaking the budget. Now the way it works is the first year any legislator could put in any bill. Yep. The second year, which is a little bit shorter session, it's 3 months, all the bills have to be run through a committee. So if I wanted a bill, I have to ask you in the committee to raise it for me unless it's a financial budget bill. And then I can do it on my own. That's kind of the way it works. So this is the third time I've been through the budget process. Okay. And this time was interesting because if you look at the matchup in the House right now, there are, out of 151, there are 64 Republicans. So we're only 12 seats away from a majority. Yep. So it's never been that way. The year before I started, it was 30. It's been a long time since
the Republicans had the
there was a little blurb in like the 80s or something, I think, where they had it. But majority of the time, the last 40 years or so, it's been one house. The Democrats have had it. Yeah. So this time it's been an interesting dynamic because they had 37 Republicans probably 5-6 years ago, and now we're up to 64. Yeah. So there are always a group of very moderate Democrats who tend to kind of vote more fiscally conservative. And now it's interesting. It's a lot harder for them to keep everybody on the reservation to get some of their votes through. So it was interesting. The budget debate, I don't know if anybody paid attention, but when it came to session, it was called the day before the end of session. So it was a Tuesday. Session ends on a Wednesday at midnight every year. It's Wednesday at midnight. It's the first Wednesday in June after the first Monday, I think. Okay. So Tuesday they call the session, and we're in session that day. They didn't have votes for the budget. Literally didn't have votes. So we're waiting and waiting and waiting, and they're not calling it. We're doing other bills, but we're going through the night on Tuesday night. Finally, about 4 o'clock in the morning, we hear a rumor. It's like, oh my gosh, they got the votes for the budget.
What does that mean?
Meaning there were a lot of folks who really weren't for it. Okay. So they twist arms, and in the political world behind the scenes, obviously on both sides. Okay. We talked about this before privately. Yeah. The politicians are all trying to work together and figure out a way to get their votes through. Maybe they're saying, "I'll help you with this project, that project." They're negotiating. The bottom line it was a very, very tight. It was won by I think 3 votes or something. It was very tight, but I think we debated it until 11 o'clock in the morning on Wednesday. Finished up, we all took a break. I think I took an hour and a half nap on my couch, and we were back in for session until midnight. It was a very weird year, but that's kind of how the budget evolved. I mean, the big picture of where it came from.
Interesting.
I think right now, as this moves along, it'll die down. We won't hear as much about it for a while. I think the companies are still the businesses are still very engaged. I know GE's done. I mean, they're going. The last I heard, it's either Boston or it's New Hampshire. Wow. So there are a lot of companies, I think, have come to a point where they feel like it's just not advantageous for them to stay. And you can just, that's just, they're going to go.
Yeah.
Right, I heard about that. Didn't they take out a big ad in the newspaper saying, we're not welcome here?
When during the budget debate,
right.
when this thing hit, I have never seen the companies get this into it.
Yeah.
And on the other side, it was interesting. You had nonprofits and you had some of the unions up on the Capitol steps, talking about their side. So it was a very interesting dynamic as this thing unfolded. It was it was a difficult year.
Everybody stood to lose something, and nobody wants to lose anything. Nobody wants to. I want you to take it out of the other guy's pocket instead of mine. That's human.
There's no question about it.
That's human nature.
Listen, the stinky part about politics is it's so political.
Yeah. Except for politics. Politics is.
You go up there, and there's no question that there was a lot of pressure from, and I'll say special interest, and
everybody's a special interest.
But everybody's special interest, right on, because it's not always a bad thing. We use special interest as a bad word, but if you think about it, if you're AARP, you're a special interest. If you are a small group of people who have a particular issue with environmental issue, I mean, like this year, there were groups of people out there for banning microbeads. Microbeads are small pieces of plastic that are found in consumer products like exfoliants and face cream, exfoliants.
Okay, right.
Yeah, so a number of us put in bills this year to ban them, to take them out of products because they really mess up our water infrastructure.
Oh, wow.
They're bad. And there were groups out there who were coming up to that. Well, they are a special interest.
Yeah.
And it's not a bad thing. But up there, there are so many different groups, and I think it's really hard for the folks in the legislature to, keep that straight and narrow and figure out what they want to do that's right. But
it's always tough to do the right thing, but that's why you're there. That's why you guys get paid the big bucks. By the way, they don't. They get a very small salary.
Labor of love.
They get a very small salary for doing an awful lot of work, and it's not just it's not just a 2 or 3 month of the year job. It's it's constituent questions. Pretty much nonstop all year long.
Yeah, it's interesting because in politics, people do, you're doing the constituent work, which is really, really important. Constituent work is things that people call you up for. They're having problems in the community.
Okay.
You could have somebody having a problem with DMV.
Okay.
You name it. There's different things come up all the time. Which constituent work is a lot of fun, actually. It's very interesting. Yeah.
It's got to be a lot of fun, and it's satisfying because you're talking to real human beings. And you know that they're gonna however you did them in their own eye, they're gonna talk to other people and say, well, Dan really helped me on that, or Dan really he wasn't able to help me, but he gave it a good shot, or Dan didn't do a damn thing for me.
And there are times. I mean, I had an experience like that in my campaign.
Yeah.
I had an experience where I met a woman, and she told me, she's like, politicians basically just aren't with anything, and had a bad experience. And I said, well, tell me about it. She goes, it was with you.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what? And basically, we had tried to help her with some stuff when it came through.
Yeah.
I don't know if that we really dropped the ball per se, but maybe I changed in LA's legislative aids or something. But it wasn't answered the way she needed it to come out. And
right.
I felt terrible about it, and I was able to bring something to the table and help her, because as a state representative, in her case, what she needed some financial assistance, not money, but education.
Yeah.
I was able to get her set up through different resources to have a financial advisor and somebody help her out. That's what she really needed at the time.
Oh.
So there are a host of things that you can call your legislators for. You name it. I get calls, and that is one of the fun parts of the job. And I like the policy part, like we were joking about growlers a minute ago.
Oh, okay, go on.
Yeah. So
refresh our audience about
to do with
growlers.
The beard?
No, not the beard. But
okay.
It's beer.
Beer.
So I don't know if you ever knew, in other states, you could go to a restaurant and you could have a 64-ounce jug of beer filled. And you couldn't do it in Connecticut. So if you wanted to buy draft beer in Connecticut, you either had to go buy it in a restaurant and have it there, or you had to buy a keg.
Okay.
Well, this year we got a bill through that will allow restaurants like Greenwood Tap and Ale or anyway downtown that they can sell a growler to go.
Oh.
So like if you were a big craft beer person, like there's a number of years ago we were doing a craft beer trail, so now you can buy a growler in Connecticut. And that was my favorite beer this year my favorite bill, because my last opponent said I was a good guy to have a drink with.
Well, some of us that aren't real keen on beer. I'd let myself be nameless on that, although it is me. My word for craft beer, along with all other beers, is crap beer. So, having said that, go ahead.
No, I'm not even a huge beer drinker, believe it or not. I'm not, and it just, to me, it was a product that you couldn't get, and there were a lot of constituents and people out there who wanted it, but we were letting the political stuff stand in the way. Yeah. And we were able to get that through this year, and so
fair enough.
We'll see where that happens.
So it's a 64-ounce beer stein?
It's a jug.
Oh, the jug.
It's about yay tall.
Okay.
And they cap it off. It has to be done from the restaurant selling the beer.
Okay.
So, for instance, I think Putnam House in Bethel has theirs done already.
Right.
A number of places who choose to do it will do it. I think it's going to be a big boom for the craft beer industry.
Yeah.
It brought in $2 million for the state.
You got me there because I would much rather have, not liking beer, but saying that if you're going to drink beer, at least don't let it be that Budweiser crap. Let it be the locally brewed crap instead of the Budweiser crap, because it's local. It's
It is very much across the state. We have all these small,
much preferable to the big breweries, especially the ones that aren't even owned by Americans anymore, like Bud.
Right.
So what are some other changes you're thinking about to bring income into the state, like tolls? What are they talking about? Maybe?
Tolls was a big part of the budget discussion, so it didn't happen.
Oh, okay.
That's come up year after year after year.
Okay.
And I think on one hand, there are a group of people up there who feel like this is a great way to bring in extra money, and somehow we're going to take our due from the folks coming across the state.
Yeah.
The other side of the argument is that it kind of unfairly hurts some of the border towns.
Right.
Even if you put it in the middle of the state, it's not great. But
Yeah.
if you put one on the Danbury, like where we are, I was
yeah.
way out against tolls.
Yeah.
Because if you put a toll on the edge of Danbury, our economy really relies a lot on New York.
Yeah.
Right.
And the mall and things like that. It would not be good for us.
Right, right.
The other big thing is how much money do you actually get from it?
Right.
We've heard estimates from anywhere from $20 to $70 million a year.
Right.
Is that really worth the offset of
not a
what
lot.
we take to put? It's not a lot.
Right.
In
And you lose something in terms of in terms of sales tax that we would collect. That we wouldn't collect, that we would have collected. Now, I used to be. Now, I'm old enough, so I remember the days when they had tolls on the highways. I remember the tolls on 95. There was one in Norwalk. There was one on the Connecticut border. And my main concern with tolls had to do with the environment, in that when cars are standing still, waiting to go through the tolls, you get this accumulation of carbon monoxide from the cars, which you wouldn't have if the cars are traveling at a steady pace. Nowadays, with the Easy Pass, you really don't have that. So that took a lot of my opposition to tolls away. That alleviated a lot of my concerns about tolls. Whether you have them on the border, whether you have them, mid-state, wherever you have them, it doesn't slow people down anymore, because I don't have an Easy Pass, because I don't go anywhere that would require it. But if you have it, you're just slowing down slightly. You're going through the Easy Pass lane.
Yes.
And it actually, in fact, saves money, because it allows for fewer toll booth workers, which, even though I guess it's a fair income, I've never met a toll worker that liked what they did. They hate it. It's horrible. It's boring work. Even if you say thank you, even if you thank me, if you chat with them for a second, then they're like,
well, like a lot of people, I didn't see a lot of upsides, and we do collect a lot of tax revenue. I mean, we're one of the states that has not only a gross receipts tax on our gasoline, but then we have an extra tax, which is supposed to go to a special transportation fund.
That's another point. That's another good point, because there's complaints about that all over the place, and rightfully so. That if money is earmarked for a particular usage, whether it be casino money for education, no matter what it is, that money should rightfully go. And I don't think anybody's going to, in principle, oppose the notion that money should go towards where it's intended for.
Oftentimes in Connecticut, it may not make it there all the way. We have a nasty habit in Connecticut where almost everything goes straight in the general fund, and then less of it comes out. So we'll have all these taxes go in the general fund or towards gasoline and oil and things like that. But then what actually comes out is usually less than what went in the first place. I think it was about $100 million difference.
Wow.
But the other way to look at these big infrastructure things like what we're doing now, as you know, the governor has come forth with a broad transportation plan.
Right.
Much of that is going to be done through long-term bonding because we're talking in the billions and billions of dollars.
Wow.
The $70 million in tolls issue is not a ton when you're looking at
billions.
Or if you're looking at a $20-some billion budget per year,
right.
I really think we're going to lose more than get. And the other part of it is there's a conception out there that somehow truckers aren't paying their share when they come through the state, and they are.
Right.
Because what happens is they actually pay an over-the-road fee when they come through the state already. In fact, when they go buy gas in the state, I think they get a deduction from the tax from that gas to even it out for them. So we are one of the more expensive states for truckers to come through.
Wow.
So we are bringing money in from those folks. So it's not like it doesn't exist.
Okay.
I would have known that and had when I'm in the legislature, I learned that.
Right.
A lot of that stuff you don't see out in the public.
I did not know. It's good to find that out and to factor that into the overall equation of tolls and things of that nature. Because I would have said, truckers don't.
Right.
They can make it through this little entire state without even buying gas, so it doesn't make any difference. They don't have to put anything into us. Yeah. And while they're wearing down our roads.
Right, but they're already paying. We get it from their companies. There's an over the road. Yeah, so we
reasonable.
We are getting money from those guys, which is great. And I have not heard the number, but I've heard we're on the higher side of that. Compared to a lot of states. So anyway, with respect to the toll deal, it'll be back next year. It'll be back every year.
Oh,
I think there's I think people always look at that as an easy way to get money.
Right.
So anytime there's a budget, they're going to look for it.
Okay, we're going to have to break it off there. We're going to come back and do a second show, but here's the notion. One of the things we'll talk about in the second show is education, because we had a very important court decision many, many years ago, Sheff v. O'Neill. O'Neill was governor of Connecticut, and the state of Connecticut was sued about the funding of education because, quite frankly, poorer school districts get screwed. Now, what came out of that was educational cost sharing as a response to that, and that allots money back to the municipalities that have less in the way of money to spend on education to do something toward equalizing the cost of education, to see that the kids in Bridgeport and kids in Danbury get something a little closer to what the kids in Greenwich and Westport and New Canaan and some of the wealthier communities get per capita. We'll talk about that a little further on our second show. But this is Progressive Soup. I'm David Stevenson. Emily Volpatesta, co-host. Ian Carter, our guest, doing a pretty good job of playing both sides of the equation.